So we'll get into our first question. So the first question is for Brent. We'd love to have a little bit of an overview about the online safety environment in Aotearoa, New Zealand, including with some of the trends that you've been seeing, particularly since the pandemic hit.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be part of the online safety community. Certainly things are changing, and Netsafe is obviously looking to create a safe and positive online environment. And so what we've sort of been seeing in the last couple of years is the area sort of settling into three sort of subject matter areas. We've got objectionable content that's online, we've got harmful content, and also we've obviously got at the extreme end the terrorist content, which is obviously particularly relevant for the New Zealand context. So certainly the types of information that we're seeing legislative and non-legislative approaches around those three distinct subject matters. And we did a bit of research to look at what New Zealand's habits were after lockdown, and certainly more of us saw the positive effects of getting online. A lot of us had to leave our offices at short notice, and certainly if we weren't embracing digital beforehand, we had to pretty quickly when we went into lockdown. And so a lot of people switched on the internet for the first time in different places. And with that, we managed to muddle our way through what was lockdown. So we sort of looked to what people's habits were during that time. And certainly, as you'd expect, more people being online meant that obviously there was more online content produced, and not all of that was great. So some of what we saw was unwanted communications being experienced. Obviously, our marginalised communities were more at risk. And so certainly some of the topics like sharing intimate partner imagery and also offensive material escalated during that time. And recently that was done back in 2020, but the Classification Office has done some more recent research in the last few weeks. And they've found that certainly the trend too is that many people are experiencing harmful or inappropriate content. Every year we roughly see about 3,500 reports. Our new normal is probably 20% each year on top of that. So I think this is a growing community concern around, well, how do we tackle this? And so pandemic's given us some great lessons, but we also need to get on there and address the community's concerns.
Fantastic. And Simon, picking up on Brent's point around COVID, how have you seen Meta's services being used differently since the pandemic?
Well, thanks very much, Hannah. It's great to be here with Brent and in the net safety offices in this of all weeks. The pandemic has been, had seismic impact on humanity, really, here in New Zealand and elsewhere in the world. And we're one of the companies who've been right at the heart of that, as we've seen really significant increases in the use of our products like Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp and Messenger for people to connect. And to be able to stay connected with people that they couldn't see, even if they only lived in the next town. And that's been frankly very comforting for us to see the value of products like ours and others from other companies during this time. And we also saw that this was particularly important for small businesses. A lot of small businesses started during the pandemic as people had to figure out, well, how do I make money? How can I sustain my family during this time? And we particularly saw a lot of women-led businesses starting here in New Zealand and elsewhere in the world. And many of those were saying how much they were, of course, we were all looking forward to the end of the pandemic, or certainly the restrictions on our daily lives, but that a lot of the use that the small businesses were seeing with our products was going to continue. And so it was important for us to continue to ensure that our products worked well, that we continue to innovate and to use technology to support people during those times, but also in the post-pandemic recovery. And that included, and continues to include, addressing issues around safety. Obviously Brent is the expert, along with his colleagues here at Netsafe, in terms of people's experience in New Zealand during the pandemic, and particularly for more marginalised or at-risk communities, and the kind of new challenges, or maybe a greater range of challenges. So we appreciated our partnership during this time to figure out what else we could do, whether that was around education or education initiatives with particular groups. So it's really helpful to do that, and also to work on the code that we're also going to talk about. So it really did reinforce that sense of responsibility that we have for the millions of people using our products here in New Zealand, as well as elsewhere in Asia Pacific and the wider world.
Great. And recently, just changing tacks a little bit, we've seen a lot of action in the policy space globally regarding online safety. Simon, I'll just go back to you for this question. What do you see as some of the key global trends in this space, and how are technology companies such as Meta responding?
Well, one of the big trends we're seeing is there's just a lot more regulatory activity. There are many more countries that want to talk with us and my members of my policy team who operate right across Asia Pacific, and they want to talk to us about their concerns in terms of understanding how do we approach issues of safety and harmful content. They're expecting us, rightly, to be more transparent and to be more accountable for some of the big decisions we make in this space, in terms of where we draw the line, and then how we enforce the line, and indeed how we deal with content that may not get reported. And in response to that, we've been continuing to kind of work hard to figure out how can we respond to those perfectly reasonable questions from regulators and from safety organizations, including our partners like Netsafe. So one thing I would point to is we have something called the Community Standards Enforcement Report. We publish it every quarter, and it provides really detailed information about a number of different kind of harmful types of content on Facebook and Instagram, how prevalent, so how common that kind of content is, and then how effective we are at acting on it before it's reported to us and before people see it. And I'm pleased to report that during the course of the last couple of years, we've continued in most areas to see that we have been able to get to content before it's reported using technology, as well as significant investments in people. So we have some 40,000 people who work in the company on safety and security, and we've invested more than $16 billion in this area since 2016. So those are the kind of things that people are interested in as they, governments, and regulators, as they think about, okay, then how do we hold you to account? How do we ensure that you continue to make these investments, that you continue to focus on maybe new harms, new things that are emerging with different types of technology? And they're always very interested in the partnerships we have and how we are responding to concerns in particular countries that may be associated with, say, particular indigenous groups or more vulnerable groups that maybe we don't see in other places.
Great. And a question for you, Brent. So yesterday, Netsafe and NZ Tech launched the Aotearoa New Zealand Code of Practice for Online Safety and Harms. Can you just tell us a little bit about what the code is, why does it matter for Aotearoa, and some of your insights to what you think the benefits of a voluntary code are?
Yeah, sure. It's great to be in a position to have 5 founding signatories, and hopefully over the course of the week, as more people become familiar with the code, we'll see that grow. So I'm really pleased that Netsafe, with partners, stakeholders, and the wider community, have sought to address sort of 7 key areas. Most of those are familiar to people, but for the first time, it's having conversations about misinformation and disinformation, and also hate speech. So having that in a code, naming those topics, and also putting in place some really key accountability and review mechanisms. And one of the key features of the code around accountability is actually setting up a governance structure which will actually hold the signatories to account. And that will be multi-stakeholder. And I think that's reflective of the commitment, like Simon said, was in relation to multi-stakeholderism. So looking at different communities' perspectives will be really critical around who sits on that governance level. We've got also public complaints mechanism, which is of course always encouraging to let end users have their say about a breach of the code, and will be really critical that there's a proper ecosystem approach to make sure that those complaints are funneled to the right areas. So I think that's really exciting development for New Zealand, to have a front door on these particular issues and for it to get to the right places to get sorted. So it's a risk-based approach too, which I think is really important in a technology landscape to make sure that it's flexible and it can be applied to the different topics. I mean, 2 years ago, we weren't even really having a conversation about misinformation and disinformation, and now it seems to be a lot of what we say. So the more risk-based, proportionate and sort of flexible approaches we can have, then the better we can get ahead of the technology change and also make the most out of it.
Great. And I just want to send a quick reminder to everybody in the Zoom to send through your questions, because I'm going to ask the last question in the formal segment now. So a question regarding the future. So there's been rapid changes in technology from desktop to mobile, and now we're talking about the metaverse, which we know provide huge opportunities for many people. But in both of your roles, there's really a lot to consider in regards to preventing harm. So I'd like to ask you both, starting with Simon, how are you and your organisations thinking about policy as a tool to ensure people have safe online experiences?
Thanks, Hannah. So I'm really pleased we get a chance to talk about the metaverse. There's a lot of excitement about this globally, with many more people engaged in thinking about what this might mean. And just to help explain it, this is really about a shift away from experiencing the internet on a flat screen, like on your phone or a tablet, or maybe even like this, in terms of dialing into a Zoom call, and instead having an experience which is more immersive, a real sense of presence, so that when you're using a metaverse-enabled device or application, you can actually be fully immersed in it, almost as if it's a real-world experience. It will be very much of the moment, in real time, and actually rather more ephemeral. So you'll experience something in the way you do now, whether it's a conversation with someone, but it's not something where you're waiting for somebody to post and then you're going to go and comment on it, etc. So there's lots of excitement around this, with many different types of technologies, and I know from my experience this week, there are many different creators and developers, including from the Maori community, who are very excited about what this can achieve. But frankly, like every type of online technology, we also have to be mindful of the potential harms that could come from this space, and they will be in some ways similar to the kind of harms that we see today, particularly around conduct and around how people interact with one another and how people can feel safe in an environment where they may not only be meeting people they know. So a lot of the things that we've learned about environments like the ones that we operate, Facebook and Instagram, but also, frankly, online spaces developed by other companies, we can bring a lot of that learning to issues of addressing safety and harm and managing risk, and frankly, innovating responsibly is the way that we think about it. And safety and integrity is one of 5 kind of pillars that we at Meta have framed in terms of things we are going to focus on as we build these kind of technologies, with other things being privacy, with economic opportunity, voice and expression, and also diversity and inclusion. So I'm maybe just getting a bit of echo there from someone. We're going to just try and keep going, despite these technology challenges that we've got. Okay.
Sorry.
Love doing live TV.
It's like
the equivalent of live TV. I'm sure we've all got some stories, those of us who've done live interviews before, about when the technology can take over. But I'd say that finally on this, the key to addressing these issues is to collaborate, to be open about them, to actually let's explore, let's do research, let's understand some of these very early days experiences of using these products. We've already introduced some safety features into our Quest 2 product, and we're keen to learn from others, including members of our Safety Advisory Board, and Netsafe is one of those, which is a global advisory board for all of Meta's products. So we think there's tremendous opportunity for collaboration here, and everything we've learned about the online environment today, we can continue to bring as we develop products in the metaverse.
Thanks, Simon. That's really exciting. And Brent, do you have any thoughts on that? It's not a small question.
Yeah, no, certainly here at Netsafe, we had a conversation about our purpose, and that got us thinking about what the meaning of online was. And here at Netsafe, we've sort of talked about creating a safe and positive online experiences. But it became about safe and positive experiences in spaces and places. And I think that's, I want to bring that conversation because we're learning more in different ways. We're switching on the internet in different environments and we're experiencing it differently. And whether it's in the augmented reality space or the physical space, I just think we need to be safe, full stop, because both of those worlds are blending and getting blurry. And so when we're in those spaces, I think we need to be switching on an online or switching on a safety message. And so one of the things that I'm seeing as a development is sort of more education and prevention, so that we can teach people good etiquette, really good behaviours, so that that will hold them in good stead no matter where they are. And I think that's sort of what we've got to get back to, because you can tell people parental controls or settings and things like that, but even today when we're trying to jump between Zooms and other things, every single thing has its own little quirk. Yes. So I think, you know, as part of that regulatory toolbox, we've got to think about different ways of getting safety messages in different channels, like codes, legislation, into curriculum at schools, and really just getting that message out there in the community.
Fantastic. And we've had a few questions come in from the Zoom. Thank you, everybody. So the first question is, how do you think this online safety code compares to similar regulation that has been happening in the UK and other regions? I might get Simon, you to take that one first.
Sure. Well, actually, it's very interesting. As someone who, I'm from the UK originally, as you can probably tell in terms of my accent, I don't work on the policy environment there, but I have done in the past. I used to be the director of policy for Facebook, as we were in the UK. And, you know, the UK was one of the leading countries when it came to developing industry-led approaches to online safety. There has been a switch towards a focus on regulation for various political reasons. That's now stalled, and people are waiting to see. I do think it kind of indicates that sometimes if you wait for the politicians to regulate, you might be waiting a long time and you may get something that really isn't fit for purpose. And it's one of the reasons why, as I mentioned, we've been investing in transparency. We've created our own kind of models for accountability, including the oversight board. And now with this code in New Zealand, we really do see this is groundbreaking. And we see an opportunity for, you know, it's early days, just launched, initial group of signatories looking for more. There's some sorts of things we've got to work through together with Netsafe. But we think it's a really potentially very good model for approaching this, which is not trying to be hard and fast, that thou shalt do it this way, but rather let's ensure we're all focused on the right things. We're explaining our approach to trying to reduce harm and manage risks, and then that we're held to account for that, both in terms of how we report on it on a regular basis, but also through this complaints mechanism. So we think it's leading edge work.
Fantastic. Would you like to lead the world in New Zealand, even though we are in the bottom of the world?
Top of the world, I think.
Top of the world, yeah.
Just have to turn the world on its axis.
Brent, do you have any comments on that? Or?
Just I think, like, as I said, it's not one size fits all with this. Safety is multi-dimensional, and so you've got to throw a whole lot at keeping people safe online. So I would rather take an approach that I'd take everything, so codes, laws, education materials. I think it's a whole grab bag of tools that we need, and that'll hold us in good stead.
Great. And the second question that's come in is around misinformation. So there's been a lot of debate around the rise of misinformation, particularly since the start of the pandemic. How do you think the code that was launched yesterday will help curb some of these concerns that people are raising? Brent, I'll start with you for that one, I think.
Yeah, so obviously we've named it. It's included as one of the principles in the code. And so basically through the complaints process, people are going to have a right to say, we think that this is misinformation. And then through that process, we're going to have to fine tune what is and isn't misinformation. So it's a bit like each matter's factual. So we're going to have to take a look at each individual complaint and then grow our understanding around what is in and what is out. And in this area, we're a bit lucky in that Australia is about a year ahead with their misinformation and disinformation code. And already there's been some tweaks with that as they've understood what the community's concerns are. And I can sort of see us following a similar path of letting the end users speak and then making decisions around that.
Great.
Yes, I think it is one of the most difficult areas. I think let's recognize that, and we're pleased nonetheless that this is included in the code. It's important that, given the significance of this and the risks associated with it, that we as companies have to be open and transparent about the approach that we are taking. And I'm hopeful that as we shine more of a light on this and people are able to understand how different signatories are approaching it, that together we'll learn from one another about best practice, and that people will feel with, especially given the convening role of Netsafe in this, that people will feel some degree of reassurance about the seriousness with which we're approaching it, but will also get a really good understanding of some of the really difficult decisions in this space.
Fantastic. There has been a lot of talk about the metaverse, and I know you've touched on this a little bit earlier, Simon, but we've had a question come in about how the code will cover up harmful content in the metaverse and how you're thinking about that, not just in New Zealand, but globally as well.
Yes, absolutely. We think one of the really good things about the code is one can see how it can develop to encompass metaverse type services, and because of the way it's structured, and that's probably not true, frankly, for some other approaches elsewhere in the world, which are very focused on the kind of 2D experience now, and a notion that every online service involves posting something. Well, actually, that's not necessarily how the many metaverse products will work. So I think there's tremendous opportunity here. But it's early days for the code and it's early days for the metaverse. So let's not try to, I think especially boil the ocean. Let's actually take it step by step, and let's focus on the products that are out there now and used at scale by millions of Kiwis. And then let's get that right. And then let's start thinking about, okay, what's next?
Great. And do you have any comments on that, Brent, or final thoughts that you want to add? Just noting that we've got 1 minute to go.
No, just again, language is important. So again, trying to be as impartial and neutral so that it, while we're tweaking on the way through and making adjustments, that it will stand the test of time. So I think that's, again, the benefit of a code is that it can be modified as we get better understanding around the new developments, which is exciting.
Great. So that reaches time for today. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. I just want to give a quick plug to Netsafe. If you haven't seen their Net Safety Week agenda, do make sure you go on and sign up to. There's a whole range of amazing events this week. You can find out more about the code on the NZ Tech website, where you can download a copy and see a little bit more about the signatory. So I encourage you to look at that if you've got further questions as well. But for now, I just want to thank Brent and Simon for being with us today, and Netsafe for hosting us. Ka kite.